Thank you, Joanne, and so good to be here with all of you. Again, my name is Stef Kight, and I'm a congressional reporter for Axios, and I am co-author of our Hill Leaders newsletter. I don't know if you've noticed, but there's a lot going on Capitol Hill these days, so if you're looking for a fast, fun, and insider way to keep track of it all, Hill Leaders is the newsletter for you. And speaking of everything going on Capitol Hill, I'm very excited to introduce our next guest, who has had a front row seat to what has been a mad dash of legislating in D.C. this year in Trump's new Washington. So please help me welcome to the stage the Senate Banking Chairman, who is also the NRSC Chair for this election cycle, South Carolina Senator Tim Scott.
Steph.
Right, thank you, Senator. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you?
Great, so good to be here with you. Thanks for taking the time.
Yes, ma'am.
This event is all about looking forward to big changes in industry, changes in policy, and your committee, the Banking Committee, recently voted to move forward on two pieces of legislation that could have big impacts in the crypto industry. Those are the Genius Act and the Firm Act.
Yes.
Can you give us a smart brevity look at why these two bills matter?
Well, I think stablecoins is if you think about it from a guy who's 50 plus years old, stablecoins is like having a traveler's check on blockchain. And so it creates access across the world. And it also democratizes in a powerful way. So as a kid who grew up in poverty in a single parent household, I always think about how important it is to make it easier for single mothers and people struggling to reduce their costs and have greater access. And the faster we get there, the easier it is for the average American to live their version of the American dream. And so the stablecoin legislation just takes a leap in that direction. The Firm Act is very different in that I think about the Firm Act as a way of us addressing the issue of modern day redlining. As a guy who grew up in the Deep South, I remember the days, and frankly not that long ago, when there was redlining. Some places would not bank you because of what you look like. And so today we're seeing that from a partisan perspective. And so the Firm Act eliminates the reputational risk or the redlining based on your partisan affiliation or what business you're in, like cryptocurrency was frankly debanked. Why? Because they were unpopular with the powers that be. And if you look at the current regulatory regime, thankfully, Rodney Hood, the current comptroller of the OCC, has said yes and amen. So he too has eliminated the reputational risk. And we're seeing the same kind of action now moving throughout the regulatory framework, which is great news that those folks in charge are purging from their docs the ability to use reputational risk to debank people they don't like or industries they don't like. So really good news moving forward.
All right. And so with both of these pieces of legislation, the stablecoin legislation, the Genius Act, as well as the debanking legislation, the Firm Act, it's past that first step, getting through committee. What is next here? Have you talked with Majority Leader John Thune about the timeline for maybe getting these on the floor?
Yeah, the good news is the stablecoin legislation, the Genius Act, is a bipartisan piece of legislation. I want to give a shout out to Senator Also Brooks from Maryland. She has done a fantastic job of working with us to make sure that it fits the code for us to have 60 votes, because in the Senate, of course, we still have the filibuster, thank God, and that requires us to work in a bipartisan fashion if we want John Thune to take our legislation seriously. And fortunately, he is taking it seriously, and he's excited about taking banking priorities and products onto the floor. So I'm very optimistic that we'll see that on the floor sooner than later. We likely have more than 7 Democrat votes, which means that we can get this on the president's desk, and that will be a good day for America, because we have to make sure that we innovate before you overregulate, especially in the digital asset space. And the faster we get that done, the more likely we are to have more people in this country living their version of the American dream. So it's exciting news.
So that stablecoin legislation you are expecting to move on the floor in the near future?
Absolutely.
Any timeline more specific? A couple weeks?
Specificity is not always your friend, so I'm going to leave it right there.
Fair enough.
Who knows when the floor is one of those creatures where you want your legislation up there. John has said without question he is looking forward to putting it on the floor. We have the votes. Great news. You throw that into the priorities. I think we get there before too long.
And you mentioned that this piece of legislation is bipartisan. The crypto space is an area where we do see some bipartisan work.
Yeah.
How important was it for Senator Gillibrand to get on board with the stablecoin legislation, and what is your relationship like with her?
Frankly, I have a healthy relationship with Gillibrand. We have the exact same jobs. I'm fighting every day to get more Republicans elected, and she's doing the same thing for the Democrats. So it's interesting that you can find bipartisanship when you're agnostic about what you're doing with whom. So as long as you focus on the what and not the who, you get more things done. And I'm excited about the fact that we had Senator Brooks, we had Senator Kim, Gallego, all on board, all on the Banking Committee moving forward on that, all Democrats as well. So from my perspective, having a vote with 5 Democrats on the Banking Committee means it has a really strong opportunity to be successful on the floor of the Senate. And it's that kind of bipartisanship that America has been missing for a very long time. And it's good to see us working under regular order, or working through the Banking Committee, and then we head to the floor with a lot of optimism and momentum behind us.
Right. So you alluded to the other hat you wear. You're also chair of the NRSC, leading Republicans' efforts to keep the Senate majority, potentially gain seats next year. So I wanted to pivot to kind of that job you have now. And we have obviously had some big news. 3 Senate Democrats who have announced that they are not going to be running for re-election in battleground states: Gary Peters, Tina Smith, Jeanne Shaheen. How does that change how you approach next year?
Well, certainly adds a little optimism to our opportunity to pick up more seats. My goal is to stay in the majority. My stretch goal is to add seats. I'm a big fan.
How many?
Well, I'd like to be at 55. As Steph knows, I move around a little bit. I'm a Southern guy. My mom wanted me to be a preacher, so it's easier for me to talk and stand at the same time. Come on down here.
Okay. Not too long. My heels are high.
We're not taking up an offering. Maybe a couple of y'all right here, but no. So from my perspective, our job is to increase our majority. How do we increase our majority? We simply say to my friends on the other side of the aisle, thank you for retiring. We hope to replace you with a Republican. But at the end of the day, this is going to be a battle. We've got a lot of work to do. The American people will have a clear choice. I think of states like Minnesota, where this last election, we lost that state by about 2 points, about 80,000 votes. I think about Michigan. We lost Michigan by 0.3%, about 18,000 votes out of millions cast. I think about Georgia, where today every single constitutional office holder in Georgia happens to be a Republican, even though both senators are Democrats. So I think we have a real strong possibility of picking up a seat in Georgia. I think about the defensive posture. You win Super Bowls, they tell me, with good defense. Philly might disagree with that, but as a Cowboys fan, I'm just hoping and praying to go back to the Super Bowl. It's funnier than you were laughing.
Go Eagles.
I can tell she's not from a Cowboys land called Dallas, but at the end of the day, playing defense requires us to be very successful in Maine and in North Carolina. 2 really hard seats for us to hold, but the good news is Susan Collins is a perfect person for her race, and Tom Tillis does a really good job in North Carolina. So we have a lot of defense to play, and we have offensive opportunities to include New Hampshire as well, where Jeanne Shaheen, our good friend, just retired, and hopefully we'll have a chance to pick up that seat as well.
Well, speaking of the offensive play here, when you're looking at New Hampshire and Georgia, of course, there's a lot of speculation about Governor Sununu, Governor Kemp. How are those conversations going? It looked like Sununu was in town yesterday. Did you speak with him?
We did. We had dinner last night. As we would say in North Charleston, what had happened was, so in other words, it was okay conversation. I think we have an opportunity to have him really seriously consider that race. I've talked to him several times. He's gone from to What does that mean? I don't know either, by the way, but we're going to find out soon enough. I think he'll make a decision in the next 60 days. I also think that Brian Kemp, governor of Georgia, is in a strong position. If he runs, he wins. Chris Sununu runs, chances are he wins as well. I think Governor Kemp will make a decision probably in the next 60 days. So we'll have a pretty clear picture of 2 really important seats. On top of that, I think we have to find a really good candidate in Minnesota, or it'll be difficult for us. And in Michigan, Question is, does Mike Rogers do it again and try to do what Dave McCormick did in Pennsylvania by losing and then running immediately thereafter and winning? So it's going to be a really interesting year. The American people will not be bored in 2026.
In Georgia, there's a lot of talk about Governor Kemp. Is there a backup plan there?
You always have a backup plan, 100%.
Who are some names?
Well, I'm smart enough not to share the backup plan because
Had to try.
everybody so far in Georgia says the same thing. Well, I'm going to run. If he runs, I'm not going to run. So until Brian makes his decision, all of the folks that we've talked to, and there's been 3 specific candidates who hold office today, who all, according to the information we've seen, the polls that we've seen, are incredibly competitive. So, but Brian's really he's a juggernaut.
Yeah. So on defense then, will the NRSC defend incumbents who may be facing primaries? People like Senator Bill Cassidy, Tom Tillis, you mentioned, and then there's also been a lot of speculation that John Cornyn could also face a primary.
Yeah, so there's no doubt. So if you think about what these races cost today, really important. As an example, we expect for Republicans and Democrats and outside groups in Maine to spend over $400 million. In North Carolina, Democrats, Republicans, outside groups will spend about $700 million. Those 2 races alone on both sides, over $1 billion. The NRSC, with a good year, we're going to have a very good year in fundraising. We've broken records every month so far. If we raise $400 million, it'll be an amazing number. That means that we don't have enough money to play everywhere, but we will play in those primaries where we have the best chance of succeeding, and we're going to make sure that those 22 seats stay red without any question. So we will use our resources in the most effective manner possible. And yeah, there's going to be some challenges here and there, but we're going to play in all the races.
Okay, so are you planning to protect Bill Cassidy?
We are going to play in all the races.
All the primaries?
All of our primaries we're playing in.
Okay, good to know. And have you discussed that idea of protecting incumbents with President Trump?
Yeah, so we've had a healthy conversation with the president about making sure that the number of senators goes from 53 to 55, and he recognizes the important role he plays. If the president is not on board, it is really difficult to win a primary, if not impossible. And so we want to make sure that the president and I are on the same page on these issues. Thankfully, we have a really good relationship, and I'm hopeful that we will see the primary landscape exactly the same. That will be easier for the NRSC to be successful. But as President Trump makes his decisions, we are in constant communication, and that's really helpful for the party. The truth is, for the first time, at least, one of the things that I always say about the Republican Party, I love being a Republican, but we don't always play well together. We don't always come to the same conclusions, kind of like herding cats. This is the first time as an elected official I've seen one team. I think President Trump has done a really good job of bringing this coalition of disparate parts of this party under one umbrella, under one tent, and that is incredibly helpful for the guy in charge of making sure that we win next year.
And so given that, you feel confident that the president will not weigh in against some of your current colleagues who are up for re-election next year?
I feel confident that I'm never going to speak for President Trump because he can speak for himself. Can somebody say amen? Hallelujah. Yes.
All right. Speaking of another big character, Republicans now have the wealthiest man in the world on their side, it seems. How do you expect Elon Musk to potentially come into play next year? Do you expect some of his money to come into play in some of these races?
Yeah. Do you have his number? I'm happy to call him and ask him for a check right now. See if he says yes. We definitely want all the resources that we can get. I will say that if you think about the public's digestion of Doge, it has been very well received overall. About 70% of Americans agree with the cuts. Now, I will say that apparently these aren't the 70% I'm talking about. Because I heard him say, is he crazy out there? The answer is no, I'm not crazy, sir, but thank you for asking the question.
Well,
so no, there's a doubt.
There have also been some town halls. We've seen the footage. What do you say to some people who are actually concerned?
There are a lot of people who are concerned. I'm not suggesting that people aren't concerned, but I'm suggesting that the promises that the president made on the campaign trail are the promises that he's kept, and poll after poll after poll suggests that the cuts that they're seeing, they are happy with. there are questions about other aspects, about whether it's the tariffs or other issues that come into play there that causes a bit of consternation. But even most people in those areas are going to be positive and or take a pause and wait to see how it actually plays out. But now my friends on the other side of the aisle, so to speak, apoplectic would be the word that I would use, that they are very frustrated, very irritated, and very motivated. And that so far has not been a major challenge on my side of the aisle. I come from South Carolina. We are a very red state. We have had a lot of folks, I mean, every place I go around the state and frankly around the country. I'll be on the road next in a couple of weeks, 5-6 days in a row, and I will say that the vast majority of the American people, believe it or not, have received the cuts very positively.
So you feel that the DOGE cuts are not going to hurt Republicans' chances of re-election next year?
I absolutely think they will help us as long as we market them well. The poll that came out March 21st, which is just a few days ago, showed that the Democrats' approval is at the lowest level in the last 30 years, and ours is at the best level I've seen in a very long time.
Well, we will see how that plays out.
We will see.
One last question
Yes, ma'am.
Before you leave. I have to ask this. I'm sure you saw the Atlantic article yesterday, the discussion in...
Thank you so much, very much. God bless you. Oh, okay. She's like, hey, come back here. Come back. I'm not going anywhere. I'm just joking. Somebody better have a sense of humor. This is all I got right here.
Well, do you believe...
Yes, ma'am.
I also enjoyed the memes. There
Yes.
were some funny aspects to this,
Yes.
but the reality is that there was a reporter who's presented military information in a context that did not seem intentional. Do you believe that someone should be held accountable for that?
Listen, the first thing I'd say is that I think the president carrying out a successful campaign against the Houthis was A, spot on and very good. B, I would say that those who ask the question, does this administration support our European allies? The answer is emphatically yes. 40% of the trade that goes through there is actually for the Europeans, only 3% for us, which is good news. Third thing I'd say is I trust the president to hold accountable his entire team and have a lot of confidence in his ability to pick and choose the right decisions at the right time based on what we know so far. We'll see what happens.
Do you think someone should lose their job?
I trust the president to make his decision.
So you have no opinion?
Well, my opinion is I trust the president to do his job.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, that's all the time we have. Thank you, Senator.
I wanted to ask you a question.
You have one question. Go quick.
Okay. Now, thank you all very much for giving me one question. I hear you are a former professional Irish dancer.
That is true.
Talk to me about that for a second.
That is all the time we have
Whoa!
today. Thank you, Senator Scott. I appreciate all of you being here. Enjoy the rest of our lineup.
Thank you.